Here in Puget Sound, the carbon factories are the kelp communities.
Many mistake kelp as an annoying weed, yet it's invaluable to fish and other wildlife. But there is a problem.
We're interested in learning more about how we can create conditions in which kelp can thrive.
Puget Sound's kelp forests are diminishing. Now organizations are teaming up to research and restore the supply. Work is nearing completion on a rest stop designed to benefit migrating salmon.
Salmon are incredibly resilient. They will figure out a way, and so we're trying to give them a little bit of a boost.
These stories and more next on CityStream. Hello, I'm Jeff Renner. Welcome to a special environmental edition of CityStream from Elliott Bay Park. From the skyline to the shoreline, this park offers stunning views. Pier 90 sits to the west, and the grain terminals are next door. But across Puget Sound, something happening beneath the surface is a concern. The Sound was once filled with kelp forests, long strands of algae that provide food and habitat for fish and other wildlife. And while kelp forests exist in the waters behind me, they have drastically declined in other parts of the Sound. The Puget Sound Restoration Fund is now teaming up with partners to devise innovative ways to restore it. If you thought kelp was just an annoying weed, think again. Producer Pete Kassem explains why it's so vital to the marine ecosystem.
Puget Sound is an estuary, and it's one of the largest on the continent. Estuaries are productive places. Here in Puget Sound, the carbon factories are the macroalgal and kelp communities that are taking all of these nutrients and minerals that are coming off of the land in our watersheds and turning it into something that can be used in the food web. Whether you're talking about mussels or shrimp, or crab, or salmon, or whales, they have kelp carbon in them. And that functionality and that productivity starts with kelp. We don't know why, all of the reasons why kelp has declined.
Kelps were being surveyed initially because it was important for navigation. And because of that, we're able to document losses in Puget Sound.
It's those historic areas that right now we're looking at targeting for some kind of restoration. We're at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, Manchester Research Station. This is where the Puget Sound Restoration Fund operates the Kinchu Center, which is shellfish hatchery, shellfish research center, but also it's where our kelp lab facilities are.
This one looks really good. Wow.
One of the things that the lab allows us to do is to curate and manage a seed bank. So we will go to a kelp forest and we will make a collection of material there from the wild kelp. And we'll bring it into the laboratory and we can collect the spores that those kelps are producing. Right now we have roughly 20 populations in Puget Sound of bull kelp that are in our seed bank currently. And that's what we'll use for our field experiments on the enhancement trials.
We're headed to Point Jefferson. We're going to go check on our experimental kelp bed between these two buoys here. And this is what the Duwamish tribe calls the Dokegwutz estuary.
There's lots of species of kelp that live in Puget Sound. We're concerned with the canopy species because of its particular function as structured habitat.
Our historic kelp bed was right along this stretch of shoreline. That's the bull kelp, so that's what we call Nereocystis. And so we planted that here from seed that we produced in our lab in February. It grew from microscopic to what we see here today, the adult sporophyte. If it's healthy, we should see abundant kelp where we planted it.
Generally, if it is doing what the adult should be doing, which is producing spores, that's the best indicator of health. Size and shape, and we monitor that over time to see how it grows. We look at the condition of the blade and whether it's producing a lot of blades, so we'll actually go through and enumerate the number of blades.
All right, 28 blades.
Also damage from grazers. There's all kinds of things that like to eat bull kelp. Plants look good, they're growing well, they're right where they should be at the right time, and they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is to produce the spores for the natural substrate here.
This site is naturally occurring, which means no one's planting kelp here.
A piece of cobble.
It's really exciting to see so much that's creating all the habitat and the other functions of kelp right along an area where there's hundreds of thousands of people living.
And each crop of bull kelp is an annual crop. So the one that we see this summer has to sufficiently seed the bottom with kelp for there to be kelp next year. And so how do we cause that paradigm? How do we facilitate that? That's the work that we have to do right now.
The Puget Sound Restoration Fund has partnered with the Port of Seattle, which has been monitoring kelp fields in Elliott Bay for years. And the port has teamed up with the Seattle Aquarium, which is using an underwater drone to learn how kelp can be restored and protected. That part of the story as CityStream continues. As we mentioned, Puget Sound has seen a dramatic reduction of kelp forests, a vital resource essential to the marine ecosystem. But in the last few years, something surprising has happened. There's been a resurgence of kelp in Elliott Bay. All this is being studied by the Port of Seattle in partnership with the Seattle Aquarium. One of the tools being used is an underwater drone known as ROV Nereo. They hope it'll help them understand how to protect Puget Sound's kelp forests in the future. Producer Pete Casson has more.
We have a Century Agenda goal to become the cleanest, greenest port in North America. We also have goals around habitat restoration. We're interested in learning more about how we can create conditions in which kelp can thrive.
Kelp is really the manna of the sea. It provides numerous services that enable fish and wildlife to thrive. Elliott Bay is ringed with kelp. Not continuously, but there are certain chunks of the waterfront that have these mats of kelp forest. This is an area of urban kelp habitat.
What we're seeing are kind of more substantial kelp beds in the north part of Elliott Bay, and then patchier, smaller kelp beds further south.
The genus of this species is Nereocystis, which means mermaid's bladder, and that's what keeps it floating at the surface. So you can see the fronds are rather like the hair of the mermaid, and it's really quite a beautiful sight, but it's also remarkable. It can grow 100 feet in a season, like a foot a day. These are kelp forests. Just like trees in the woods, these forests allow for not only plants and animals to survive around them, but also can sequester carbon. And we have a strategic relationship now with the Seattle Aquarium to see why it grows in some places and not others, and taking those lessons and applying it to our habitat restoration efforts.
We're experimenting and trying to learn more about how to restore not only kelp, but also eelgrass beds and oyster beds, which are all keystone kind of habitats here in Puget Sound. We are in front of the breakwater at Elliott Bay Marina, and there's an extensive kelp bed that runs along the entire breakwater here. And today looks like a pretty good day to see what these kelp beds look like here. Part of our partnership with the Seattle Aquarium, we are using an underwater remotely operated vehicle.
ROV Nereo, short for Nereocystis. And we do indeed use an Xbox game controller to fly the vehicle. That's good. And we have cameras facing downwards and a camera facing forwards, and we have lights and various sensor equipment. And our objective is to gather as much video as possible. We're conducting what's called benthic surveys. So we're looking to gather information about what species are present and where they are and what types of substrate they associate with. So conducting about 100-meter transects.
Gain is 30%.
You see all sorts of cobble, hard substrate. We are 39.2 feet beneath the surface.
What we see out there is, these really rich and vibrant kelp beds. There is a lot of understory algal species as well.
Oh, and a nice lingcod right down there.
Oh yeah, look at that.
You can go take a peek.
We're able to see that, and we're also able to see this bull kelp canopy.
We've seen large bull kelp declines in parts of Puget Sound. And our overarching objective is to better understand what types of substrate bull kelp attach to and grow on. So what we're doing for this project is training AI algorithms to know what species are. So this is a sea star, this is a sea urchin, this is a fish.
Like acrobats down there.
Yep. So one of the hypotheses for why bull kelp doesn't do well in certain areas, there's some preliminary observational evidence that kelp crabs may be contributing to bull kelp failure to thrive, essentially.
So that has led to another initiative that we're hoping to implement in 2023, and that's to place octopus pots, octopus homes, to attract octopus to Smith Cove, and they eat the kelp crab, and we're hoping that that might help the population of kelp.
And this is all part of what the port sees as part of its responsibility to be a steward of the environment that we do business in. And I think this is good for the habitat, but also those of us that depend on a healthy Puget Sound.
Getting myself into a hot mess of kelp.
And so what we're hoping to get out of this partnership is just really understanding why kelp are living where they are and what conditions they're thriving under, and so potentially we can replicate those in future restoration projects.
That's the most tangled we've been.
We are just getting a clue at the beginning of how important this species is to the recovery of the Salish Sea at large.
It's clear the health of fish and a wide variety of other wildlife in Puget Sound are dependent on kelp forests. Vital research aimed at protecting and encouraging the growth of these forests will continue far into the future. In the short term, the port and the Washington State Department of Natural Resources plan to start the Octopus Den project this spring. Just ahead, one local company is spending millions to create a rest stop for salmon. We'll explain as CityStream continues. CityStream returns from Elliott Bay Park with a special program devoted to environmental concerns. One of the most persistent is a recurring topic, summed up with the question, how can we improve the vitality of the region's salmon runs? Well, along one of the most industrialized parts of Seattle's Duwamish River, work is nearing completion on a project years in the making. As Michael Crow explains, one company is taking the lead to create a so-called salmon rest stop.
In a cascade of noise, a landscape is reborn. The setting of Vigor's shipyard on Seattle's Harbor Island is far from untouched wilderness. Here, they work on everything from Navy vessels to the Washington State Ferries fleet. But this effort is not about constructions of steel. This is about softening a section of riverbank for some of its oldest residents, migrating salmon.
So we're dredging here to generate the clean fill that we're going to place up here to build up the shallow water habitat. It'll be about 2.5 acres in size when it's done.
Alan Sprott is VP of Environmental Services at Vigor and says when the company bought the site in 2011, it inherited a legacy of contamination issues dating back to World War I. Remnants of times when the environment was not always prioritized in the quest for progress. But much like in nearby Longfellow Creek, salmon still return to the Duwamish River every year to spawn, and their young face new hurdles returning to the sea, like destroyed salt marshes that provide a gradual transition from freshwater to the salty ocean and food to grow. Vigor agreed to improve that journey as a condition of a consent decree with federal and state governments and tribes to settle historic environmental damage to the lower Duwamish.
And so our solution to that problem was to take an underutilized portion of the shipyard and create this shallow water habitat that is at the mouth of the Duwamish River.
To that end, they removed an old wooden buildway for ship construction and with it more than 5,000 pilings coated with toxic creosote. They took out 2 other piers and have removed silt laden with PCBs and heavy metals. With that contamination gone, the clean material they take from the bottom now will be used to build up the shallow fish habitat. They've partnered with salmon nonprofit Long Live the Kings and University of Washington researchers for the project.
Salmon are incredibly resilient. They will figure out a way to try to make a go of it. And so what we're trying to do, again, is give them a little bit of a boost.
Emily McCartan of Long Live the Kings describes this as a rest stop, a relatively sheltered section of healthy, functioning estuary that will let young salmon gather themselves on the way out to sea. Shallow water will support vegetation, which attracts insects for salmon to feed on.
So as they're migrating out of the river and starting to hit this salt water for the first time, they have a place where they can find food sources, they can gather energy, and hopefully we'll see that eventually translate into better survival.
Before work began, researchers sampled water and the diet of salmon passing through here and across the river at Jack Block Park. They will continue to monitor after completion to gauge success and hope this can be the first step in a chain of industrial projects to assist fish.
When you imagine healthy habitat for salmon, you would imagine a really pristine flowing river with trees on either side and really clean, clear water. They need all of those things. What we also know is that Seattle's not going anywhere, and we need to be able to figure out ways that the systems that work for humans are also working for the environment and for the fish and wildlife that also depend on them. We're all interconnected.
Certainly, salmon need all the help they can get. Chinook spawning in the rivers of Puget Sound are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, and runs have been declining for decades.
You know, as the expression goes, you know, the victim died of 1,000 small cuts. You look at Puget Sound as a whole, we've hardened the shoreline, we've reduced the grass beds and so forth. No, we're not going to put Harbor Island back into mud flats anytime soon, but the small benefits that we can achieve will pay off.
Back at Vigor, in-water work is slated to wrap up in February, and they'll also improve stormwater controls to reduce runoff. Then, researchers will return over time to study how the fish are doing. Hopefully, there will be more of them to follow.
For me personally, it's a really rewarding project to have been involved with it from start to finish. And like I said, it's something that's going to be on the landscape forever. Long past anybody that's involved in it is on the planet, that will still be here.
Fish returning to a more natural setting in the heart of a forest of steel.
It'll be exciting. That's what we're looking forward to.
More like what they knew for the many years before humans changed this place.
Hope is not lost. When we have the opportunity to say, there are salmon here, we know that if we give them a chance, they will figure out how to survive. We owe it to them and to ourselves to give them that chance.
Vigor says the habitat project cost about $28 million, and the accompanying stormwater improvements about $5 million. Now, as Michael explained, work on the project is slated to wrap up in February, and they hope this will provide a model for integrating natural landscapes into industrial spaces. Ahead on CityStream, student divers take the plunge to help purge pollution. We'll show you next. Each year, tons of trash wind up in local waterways. Most of it sits on the bottom, eventually breaking apart and spreading debris across a wide area. A dedicated group from the Divers Institute of Technology wanted to help, so they took the plunge in the battle against pollution. We scoured the Seattle Channel archives for this story, reported by Brian Callanan.
Can you guys get in the water first? Doing a trash cleanup today? We'll put two teams of scuba divers alongside the pier.
Take a deep breath and strap on a helmet. Class is now in session for the Divers Institute of Technology.
We know who the first 4 divers are.
Mike Hemian teaches this crew of students, wrapping up a 7-month course on the ins and outs of scuba and surface air supplied diving.
Well, it's exciting for them to get away from the school. They get to see different locations, different water.
I think I'm going to take a dip.
And besides having a good time,
squeeze up on it.
These young divers are getting the real-world experience they need to get ahead.
Obviously, we're all students, but it does give you a sense of what it's like actually to be out, possibly in the workforce.
When they're out looking for jobs, especially if they're looking at going inland, they're going to do this every day when they're diving.
But every day doesn't begin to describe what these students are picking up on. Literally. Trash. Tons of it lies at the bottom of Lake Washington.
Stuff I have is too big for this little bucket, Roger.
Okay, we'll bring it over to the blue bucket then.
Some of it was perhaps just an oversight when it went overboard.
A lot of iPhones, a lot of phones, a lot of cameras.
But Mike's crew can pull almost 3 tons of trash out of the water in one session here at the marina near Elliott Park. You could say they find everything but the kitchen sink. But they found that too.
The amount of trash every year is really disgusting.
Still works.
I don't know what other word to use. It didn't accidentally get there.
For this little tiny spot that we're working today, you saw how much trash we pulled out. I mean, it speaks for itself.
What's corroding at the bottom of our waterways isn't just disgusting for divers, but for all of us. Mike can see the pollution every time he pulls an old tire from the lake.
And when we take it out of the water, when we're handing it up, we get a sheen on our hands, and that's obviously not good for the lake or for the animals.
Sad to say, there's not even a good estimate on how much trash is in Seattle's waterways. But the silver lining here? The Divers Institute has volunteer garbage pickers ready to go year-round, eager to get in the water.
I look forward to coming to work when we're doing jobs like this.
We're not just sending them out, having them walk around the bottom. We're actually doing something productive and doing something helpful, environment and to the community.
The Seattle Parks Department is happy to let these volunteers use city docks. A parks crew will haul this trash away.
Just put one scuba team in at a time.
And Mike is just grateful for the opportunity.
I can't think of not getting in the water and cleaning up. And I'm happy that the city allows us to.
It does feel really good, and it's nice to be able to help out.
Call it a valuable experience in more ways than one for Mackenzie Losley. She found 3 unique figurines at the bottom of the lake.
They feel pretty heavy, like it might be gold or at least plated in gold.
But before you go looking for treasure at your local swimming hole, consider this.
The water here at the end of Leshai Park Pier is about 30 feet deep, which doesn't sound like a lot until you lose something.
Yes, that's me, trying to be an intrepid reporter with a snorkel, mask, and an underwater camera on my head. And that's the camera falling off my head and going straight to the bottom of the lake. But have no fear. The Divers Institute of Technology is here.
Thank you.
These students give a helping hand that a lot of people on this lake say is an inspiration.
I appreciate it. It's great. It makes me want to learn to scuba dive so I can help.
It's an environmental problem that needs plenty of help. Help that the Divers Institute is glad to provide.
Okay. I just think it's something we should do.
And there's something that you can do too. Be careful around the waters of Seattle, because what you drop in, accidentally or not, makes an impact.
If you'd like to help in the effort to clean up local waterways, or you just want more information about diving courses, check out this website, diversinstitute.edu. We'll be right back.
Action! We put together a new episode of Art Zone with Nancy Guppy to tell you about the incredible art that surrounds us all the time. That's art. That's art too. Yeah, sure.
Art Zone with Nancy Guppy, Fridays at 8 on the Seattle channel or streaming anytime online.
I did ask for a butterfly, but, a wiener dog, close enough.
That wraps up this special episode of CityStream from Elliott Bay Park. If you'd like to watch more of our impressive programming, visit our website, seattle.gov, and click on Feature Shows. I'm Jeff Renner. Thank you for watching.